borrow that money today, it's going to be a competitive sale. So we sent notices out. We did something called a notice of sale, which is a book, and we'll pull that out. I've got it with me to show you what we put out. So it's actually it's called a notice of sale. It's a book that talks all about the district and our credit. Put that out, publicize it online, and we expect to get a bunch of banks to bid. And the banks are representing companies that are interested in buying. I was on the phone earlier today with Fidelity answering questions for them. So a lot of companies have been calling in to get information on it. They're interested in loaning us $115 million. So I'm going to turn this over and let you hear from our financial advisor. They have a little presentation on public finance, and then I will be interrupting frequently throughout the presentation because that's what I always do. And I encourage you all to ask questions. This presentation works a lot better if you all have questions and you share those with us. So anytime you got a good question or you have a comment, raise your hand. I've got candy to provide as incentive every time you ask a good question. But the more questions you ask, the more fun this is going to be. Okay? Sound good? Okay, so I'm going to introduce Laura Howell from PFM, and we'll get started.
Hey, good morning. My name is Laura Howell. I'm with PFM Financial Advisors. We help the district when they need to issue debt. So Leanne and I work very closely, kind of just as an extension of staff. So she calls when she needs anything related to debt and how to get things financed. So we'll kind of talk through some of that with you today about what our role is and how we help the school district. And the bankers here are the people who actually go into the market and help actually get the debt. So we work hand in hand with the district, and they work as part of the team, but coordinating with the investors to find people who want to buy the money, buy the bonds that give the district the money for when they need to build these projects. So I have Robert Wilson, who's also on the financial advisory side at PFM here with me today, and Jason Human, who is on our investment side, who helps Leanne with her investments to earn that interest. And he's actually going to kick us off. Did you want to talk? Can you guys see that, or is the TV easier? TV's easier? Okay. So we'll leave that as the primary, and then we'll flip back and forth, because when we get to the point where we're doing the competitive sale, we'll put that up there and kind of explain it for you so you can see the bids come in. But to start, Jason's going to give us sort of a market overview of what's going on in the market today. We will be breaking up into teams a little bit later, where you guys will also pair off with the bankers to try and create your own investment firm to put in your bid to try and buy the TAN sale today. So some of this is to be briefing you on what's going on in the market so that you can make the best idea of what the interest rate should be to purchase these, that you're not losing money for investors, but that you put in the winning bid, which would be the lowest interest rate for the district for them to be able to buy the bonds.
And around, just to give you an idea, at 10:15, we're going to call in and talk with the short-term money desk from Citibank up in New York. And they're going to tell you what's going on in the market. So that's additional information you can use, because your job today is going to be to send a bid in. You're going to bid on the district's TAN just like the bankers are.
So we'll hand it over to Jason, and he can start to give us the market update.
All right. Thanks, Laura. So my name is Jason Human. I work with Laura and Robert out of our Orlando office, but I work on the other side of the business. I work on the asset management side. So while Laura and Robert and team are helping the school district issue debt, my job would be to invest that debt and other operating proceeds to earn the best rate of return for the school district. Okay. So we're going to start this off with a little bit of a market overview to kind of set the stage for what we're going to do today. So I thought this was an interesting quote here. So I don't know what sort of salary you're offering, but on my last job, I made a lot of dough. Right? Corny, right? Thank you. So we've got a couple big themes going on in the global markets, right? So over the past 10 years, the U.S. has been in an expansionary period. The stock market has done really well. People are earning more money. People are working. The job supply is very limited. So if you want to find a job, there's not many employees to take the jobs because there's so many out there, and people are able to find work if they want to. So domestic economic data is very positive, not as positive as kind of the global side of the house. A lot of that is due to geopolitical issues. You may have heard that the U.S. is currently in a trade and tariff battle with China. So we are trying to come to a trade agreement. When that has not come to fruition, the U.S. has imposed taxes or tariffs on China. In return, they taxed or tariffed our goods that come to them. Right? So tariffs are kind of slowing down the overall global economy. The labor market continues to remain strong, but job growth has actually tapered off a bit. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. And then the Federal Reserve, which is the group that sets the overnight Fed's funds rate, has recently reduced interest rates. So during 2018, we were climbing. The Fed funds rate was going up 1 full percentage point over the year, which was 0.25% a quarter. We've recently dropped the Fed funds rate back to 1.75 to 2%. So the Fed funds rate is now coming back down. Okay. Another funny quote here. Which is a smarter financial move, investing in hog futures or loading up the freezer with bacon when it's on sale? All right. So let's talk about the economy in
We'll get one of the bakers to answer that question for you later.
Thank you. So this shows the U.S. real GDP, so gross domestic product. So what has the GDP done going back to the third quarter of 2015? And you can see that these numbers are mostly all positive, right? Very small number in Q4 2015, but generally 2% or higher on average in GDP growth going back to that time, all right? Most of that growth is driven by personal consumption. So that's what you and me and everyone up here spends on a day-to-day basis. Our money going into the economy is driving most of the growth that we're seeing in the United States. So this is a chart looking at interest rate history going back to 1970. So if we look at the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield, you can see going back to 1970, the rates were around 6%, peaked in the 80s at 16%, and you can see where we are now here in September of 2019 at 1.87%. Right, so Treasury yields are very important to the process. We'll talk more about yields as the rest of the group goes along in the presentation.
And just a quick note on this. I've been at PFM for 9 years, and for 9 years, they've been saying that we are at the lowest interest rate history. Rates can't get any lower. And every year we put this graph up, and we're still trending down. We haven't seen them rise. They keep saying they're going to rise, and they have yet to rise in 9 years that we've been doing this.
So there's different economic conditions, a part of the business cycle, and we're going to talk about where we're at currently. So the business cycle, it goes up, it goes down. The economy expands, it contracts, it expands, it contracts over time continuously. And so some of the themes here, the logos aren't showing up. Oh, there we go. Okay. So in a contractionary period, on the left-hand side, production slows, corporate profit falls, unemployment rates go up, interest rates decline, and inflation falls. Right, so then we move through to the peak, which is right here on the chart, right? So we're peaking, everything's great, interest rates are high, full employment, high inflation. Move down into the trough again, interest rates are low, high unemployment, low inflation, and then we get back to the expansion. Corporate profits rise, stock market gains, everything's going really well, right? So where are we right now? We're about right here in the chart. You know, the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, we've come a long way since then, up to the top in the prosperity area. Except for this time, we're seeing corporate profits rise, we're seeing stock market gains, but we're not seeing interest rates go up, and we're not seeing inflation go up. That's something economists look at every day, and everyone's trying to figure out why that's occurring. The United States also has a lot of debt. So we're going to talk about issuing debt today. The United States issues debt all the time to fund the government. So currently, as of September, there's $22.5 trillion in United States debt. And the pie chart shows who holds all that debt. But I think the interesting fact here on this page is we have 325 million people in the U.S. So you and me and the bankers and the rest of the PFM staff, each of our share of that debt is $69,000 per person is our share of the U.S. national debt. That's a lot of debt. All right. So I think Laura and Robert are going to take over on this one here.
So this funny cartoon basically talks about the debt ceiling, which, do you guys know what the debt ceiling is? So it's basically when in Congress when the ceiling is set, when you're only allowed to borrow a certain amount of money, and then every year you raise it up, and so that the United States is able to meet its debt requirements. So basically, as you can see here, national debt is going up. And what do you guys think are some things that kind of increase national debt? Anyone have an idea of things that you think can make debt go up? Like, what do you think as a country that we spend a lot of money on? I beg your pardon? Like things like maybe war?
Leanne will give you candy.
War and maybe things like Social Security, things like that, like meeting some of the basic needs of people. Kind of, you have to borrow money as a country in order to meet some of those requirements. Yeah. So basically, we're going to talk about, do you guys think what, more education, more? Come on, guys. You think as you go to school more, what do you think will happen to your salary? It increases, right? So, as you can see on the unemployment, basically the more education you have, the less likely you are to be unemployed, right? Correct. And your earnings go up. So, basically, the only thing about education is more education, more money, more problems. So, yeah. More money, more problems. So this is something to consider as you're going through high school now. So basically do things that differentiate you from the rest of your classmates, like volunteer, take part in things that will make you stand out in the application process, because with that you get more money, more scholarships, and that means your parents don't have to pay for it. Yeah. So basically, don't let this be you. In the capital markets, Laura will talk a little bit about those.
Yeah, so we're going to take a quick break before we do. And with the bankers all here, we have fun facts about them. So I'm going to tell you one of the fun facts, and I want you guys to guess which one of these you think it is. So the first one is, this person learned to ride a bike at 2.5 years old. Yes.
It's easier as we go along.
Yep, just, you can. Green tie? No. No. It's the other shade of green tie. So Jim will go ahead and give himself some introduction.
Hi, I'm Jim Cook. I work for JP Morgan. I grew up in Southwest Florida. I went to Florida Gulf Coast University and then University of Florida. Previously, I've worked with a couple of different banks, but I currently work with JP Morgan in Orlando. So I'm very excited to be here today, and it's really nice to meet all of you.
Okay, so we'll talk about the capital markets a little bit before we have our call with City Short-Term Desk at 10:15. I don't know where the clicker is. So basically, this is how the district is going to go out and get money, how investors do. The stock markets and municipalities use this one and the same to try and invest their money to get people. So the district is going out where people are buying it as an investment, where like your parents, are investing the money in to try and get that return. So oftentimes, Leanne had said she was on the phone with Fidelity this morning. So they're looking at this as a potential security to put in one of their portfolios for investors to earn money on. So this is basically the trade of money out there in the market. Another funny joke. Come on, we've got him going in the right direction. Okay, so public finance, municipal finance, is basically your cities, counties, states, school districts that incorporate. And so the Florida schools can mainly issue through certificates of participation. Leanne is not allowed with her general $1.5 million to issue past a year. So they've created this special security that allows them that the school board has to appropriate all or none of the funds every year. So the schools that she has, how many schools do we have?
About half of our schools were built with money that we borrowed. It's about half. So if we default on one, if we forget to make a debt service payment on one of those, we lose access to all of the buildings. So it's half the schools would be leased out to another party to try to get money to pay the investors back. So there's a very strong incentive for us to make our debt service payments on time. I'm happy to say we've never missed one. And that was a conversation I had with Fidelity this morning, is what happened if the tax revenue doesn't come in when you expect? Are you going to be able to make the debt service payments? So we had to walk through what other funds are available, because we certainly want to pay this back when it's due in August.
Yes. And so that provides security to investors that half of the school districts, those schools here, if that debt service isn't paid on one, all of them go away. So it's not just like, if a hurricane came in and destroyed just one on the coast, you could walk away from just that one and leave that property there and make sure that you're paying all of them, no matter what's happening in those systems, if there's students there or if they are empty. So I'll flip. Just before we get to the next slide, what do you think most municipalities issue debt for? What are some of the things?
About a city, what are their responsibilities? What do they have to make sure works? Transportation, roads.
Yeah.
Borrow money for roads. What else do we borrow money for?
Public lighting.
Lighting?
Lighting.
Yeah.
Right? Say again? Public services? Yeah.
What's the first thing you do when you get up in the morning? You go take a shower? Water. Who is the last question? Water is another one. Airports?
How did you guys get here today? Bus? Yep.
We borrowed money to buy the buses.
Oh, maybe not that bus.
Okay, we borrowed money to buy the new buses. Sorry. Do any of you ride the bus to school in the morning? If you see those buses, they're new. I'll give you a hint. When you look at the bus number, the first digit of the bus number is the year we paid for it. So you'll see a lot of them that are 7s and 8s. You haven't seen the 9s yet, because it takes about 9 months for buses to get here after we order them. But you'll see a lot in the last few years.
So this is, you guys listed a lot of these. Courthouses, jails, those are some of the other things that municipalities are responsible for. So if they don't have funds for them, they go into the capital market to get investors to provide those funds for them. So you see education is about 24%, and then general purpose is 26%. So.
Y'all want to guess how much debt we have outstanding right now?
How much?
She said 1.6 trillion, and we're not anywhere near that big. We're at about 1.2 billion, though. It's still a pretty big number, and that's all related to building schools. Well, we built a lot of schools in 2007, 8, 9, and 10 with our sales tax, but we have borrowed money starting in 1994. We used to buy the concretables. The company that built them, it went out of business, so nobody makes them anymore. But those concretables that you see, those concrete portable buildings, those things have a life of about 40 years. So we can move them and where they need to go, but they're very expensive to move. You have to take them in half, and then the crane has to lift them up on a big truck. And you have to carry them on roads that can support them. There's some roads in Palm Beach County that are not strong enough to carry those portables, and you can't carry them out to the glades because they'll sink. And you have to build a concrete pad for them, and electrical and sewer and all that stuff. So it's expensive. It costs as much to move one as it did to buy them, sometimes more. But they can be moved, but you can't buy any more of them. They're not available.
So this is just, we had talked about certificates of participation, that is the main source Leanne had said, the 1.2 billion that she has outstanding, that she's utilized. But there's also a couple other options for school districts. They can go out and ask for general obligation bond referendums, which goes directly on with the taxes for your home that you pay. So Miami-Dade and Broward both have done that. Palm Beach has not. But they also have the option to do a sales surtax, which Palm Beach has participated in. Back in 2016, the voters elected this. So starting January 1st, 2017, sales tax went up slightly for that money to be split between the city, county, and the school district. So there's a lot of projects that we've worked back and forth with Leanne on, that she's got the needs that are coming up to see, when those schools are going to be built as the funds are coming in, to make sure that the funds are being spent as quickly as possible to do all those updates that they promised in the schools.
John I. Leonard was built with the proceeds of the last sales tax. And Dwyer, you all are getting a very expensive air conditioner. I've seen the budget for it. It just keeps going up. So you're getting a lot of money spent on your air conditioning system right now.
And do you guys think, why do you think sales tax are a good way of funding? Anyone?
Yes. It's something that the voters... Oh, Mike, you got... Yeah?
Well, and I'd add in that it also gets paid by visitors in the county. It's not all residents.
So it's very attractive for voters. General obligation bonds are just paid by those that live in the county. Sales tax is paid by you all, but also anyone who comes in here, that tax is paid by. So for a county that has a lot of tourism, it's a really awesome way for you all to receive additional revenues, that it's not just burdensome on the folks that are living there. So as you can see, the sales surtax, a lot of the counties in Florida have decided to go out for that in the past several years. Most of the referendums have passed with flying colors for the voters because they see it as a great way to raise additional revenues. So this was the need for $1.3 billion in technology and security, and so this is just some of the things that Leanne is working on with her facilities planning for the sales tax to get this done for you guys in your schools. So we'll take a break and do another introduction of one of the bankers. So this person lived in the Far East. Light green. You guys like the light green, don't you? Orange? Blue tie? Blue tie is right.
I'm John Generale. I'm with Wells Fargo Securities. I did live in the Far East for 2 years in the Philippines and Guam and Korea when I was serving in the military. That was a long time ago. I've been in public finance. I've been with Wells Fargo for about 11 years. I've been in the industry for 28 at this point at 3 different firms, and really glad to be here with you guys today.
So we have a few minutes before we have city call in. This is when the district goes out to issue money. This is for the certificates of participation, basically the core financing team that goes through it. The school board and the financing corp are one and the same, so they both have to vote on this to make the resolution pass to go through, and obviously Leanne is integral to this as we are moving forward, as well as many other departments within the district. And so then it comes down to financial advisors, bond and disclosure counsel work hand in hand to get the deal done. So almost every transaction we do, all of these players are involved. There's a lot of other folks that obviously they wouldn't get done, but sometimes we'll do a private placement with a bank, which Steve is on that side of the bank, rather going into the public markets, which some of the other ones do. So there's different players that we bring in for each of the financings depending on what the district's needs are. So this is the rest of the team. So you can see, depending on the complexity of the transaction, there can be a lot of different players that are brought into this that make a transaction for financing successful. there's a lot of the questions, since, as I said, we work hand in hand with the district, and the underwriters are out there talking to the investors to try and get them. Oh gosh, it didn't go. These are terrible. I didn't create these slides. So they often say that it's like, the underwriter is the bad guy, that we're the good guy. In all honesty, though, there's a lot of teamwork that goes into this. They want to see the deal happen as much as we do. And they're kind of the people that are here today are the go-through. They have their trading desks that are on the outside. We'll see a snapshot of kind of what it used to be back in the heyday. They're a little bit different now, a little calmer up in New York. But it's really a conjunction of making sure, a lot of going back and forth on where it's being priced to make sure that it does get buyers on the other side, but that it's affordable for the district to do. And today's sale is a little bit different because it's basically the lowest provider wins. So this is more in like a negotiated sale where we're working back and forth with the underwriters. And today's competitive, so they have to have their bid in by 11, which we'll see them come in, and it's just simply the lowest bidder wins. So when we listen to City's Desk talk to us in a couple minutes, something you want to keep in mind is that you want to make sure that it's the lowest, but that you have a buyer on the other side that's willing to invest their money for that interest rate. So we want the lowest cost for the district, but that it's a going away order for the investor. So are they on?
Hello, Casey? He's not on yet. So
Okay.
City will be dialing in any minute, and they'll be on the phone. They can hear anybody that talks in the mic. So this will be Casey from Citigroup, and he's on the short-term desk. So he's talking to the ultimate investors that want to buy our bonds. So when he calls in, he's going to give you an update of what he's seeing in the market today, what else is out there for sale, what if there's any instability or anything we should worry about, or just what's happening in the market today. And then he's available to ask questions. So if you have questions, you just need to keep speaking to Mike. So raise your hand, and I'll let you talk to him directly once he dials in. Okay?
So while we're waiting, we'll do another guess. This person is trilingual. Wow. Good job.
So, Casey Crawford has just joined the line from Citigroup's short-term desk.
Hey, Casey. This is Leanne Evans with Palm Beach County Schools. We really appreciate you calling in today.
Of course, of course.
And we've got about 30 or 40 high school seniors here that are waiting, and they're hearing a lot about public markets today, and they're going to be putting in bids on our TAN as well, in conjunction with what I hope you and a lot of other firms are going to be doing today. Could you,
Oh, that's exciting.
yeah, could you walk us through what's going on in the market and what you're seeing on your desk this morning?
Yeah, of course. Treasury markets are up pretty significantly this morning off of just generic risk off tone in terms of treasuries. Equities are up a little bit. Munis definitely a better bid this morning with treasuries, and I can just break it down a little bit better. So what I mean by better bid, meaning overall yields are going lower and prices are going higher this morning. So what we're seeing, especially the front end, is over the last couple of weeks we've had a significant amount of underperformance driven by a couple different factors. The seasonality factors, where there's been a lot more issuance, so the supply side, and just overall lack of turnover in terms of the street's balance sheet. So we've had a cheapening up in terms of the front end, which is where this note will eventually price, and we think definitely right now that front end within 5 years to 7 years is pretty cheap compared to where it has been historically. And I know that's a lot to take in right there, especially for a bunch of people that are obviously so new to finance. But what that really means is that munis are relatively cheap towards the treasury market, and most bond markets will do effectively a spread or a price based off of the risk-free rate, and that's kind of what I was talking about, where Treasury markets are cheaper, relatively rich towards overall munis. So when you look at the note today, best thing to do in terms of munis is to find a comparable security that's actively traded in the secondary market, or just coming to market in the primary market, to find where you think this security will price. So that's my primary job, is to see where things are trading and then have an opinion on pricing with those securities. Do we have any questions just generically on the competitive bid process?
I've got a student that raised his hand with a question for you. Hold on just a second.
Hello. I'm just wondering what's the difference between the primary and the secondary market?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so the primary market is where issuers come to issue new debt or reissue debt. So what they'll do is they'll come either, in the muni space, they'll come either competitively, which is what this note deal will be actively bid by a bunch of different broker-dealers with client orders, or it will come negotiated, which negotiated means that an underwriter will take a bunch of information and build out a scale for a deal, and then have customers enter in orders for that deal over maybe a day or a couple different days, and then the deal price, that will be new issue. So everyone that is in on that deal within those maturities will be priced at the same level, and then that is effectively where that new issue comes to market. And now on the secondary side, what I do on a daily basis is try and provide liquidity to our clients, where, let's just say they need to sell a bond or buy a bond to replace or add in certain maturities, and I'll help them find securities that would match those guidelines. So secondary market is over-the-counter traded within other broker-dealers and our clients, and the primary market is going to be a new issue. It's going to be a brand-new security, and it's going to be done on either a competitive or a negotiated basis.
I've got a question.
Are there any? Go ahead.
Hi, this is John. This isn't a question. Just elaborate a little bit on what he just said. So, in its simplest form, if the two of us were to enter into a transaction where I'm loaning you money, in exchange I receive a note which says you're going to pay me back at a point in time, and then Rick, who's sitting right down there, if I decide that I no longer am in a position where I want to or can hold the note that we've entered into, I sell the note to Rick. So what we did was the primary market. So I worked together with you, collaborating. We negotiated terms for the loan, and then I sold my note instrument that I have with you. It now becomes Rick's instrument, and that's the secondary market. So it's between us is the primary, between Rick and myself would be the secondary.
And do you always make money on that trade?
No.
We try to, but no. The sad truth of it is that we don't. So it's really trying to make smart decisions in terms of where you're buying a security, because ultimately, we want to provide as best liquidity to our clients, meaning like give them the best price for their underlying bonds, but as well as try to find the best offering for the client that would eventually buy the bonds from us. So, and what throws everything else into the big, into whack is with, it's not just buying a bond at X and selling it at Y. There's a whole other market, the treasury market, that makes prices move as well. So it's a very dynamic process, and we try and make money on most trades. But the answer to that question is no, we don't. We don't make money on every single trade.
Okay, do you have other questions?
Let's just talk about real quick what we think about this upcoming deal. So the project was to do a mock bid on the bonds. what would be the most comparable, from my opinion, what would be the most comparable deal that just came? There's a note deal that came this past week for Madison, Wisconsin. Similar size-wise in terms of the notional amount of the deal. It did come. It's a higher-rated security. It did come at a kind of a tighter level because of the name, but it came at around like a 133. So we were thinking maybe something that would be a little bit further back for something like this ongoing this security right now. But the real point of the process is to look at like what's actively being traded right now in the secondary market and what recent deals have come in the primary market to come up with our overall opinion on where something should trade. And on the competitive side, that's completely the competitive underwriting desk's P&L. So if they buy a bond that's too high, meaning it's too rich, and we ultimately have to sell at a loss, then it's actively affecting their P&L as well. So they obviously want to provide as best liquidity as they can for our secondary participants and provide them the best level they can, and obviously the primary issuance because they want to buy the bonds because it's a very competitive marketplace. But they have to take all of those factors into account, making that decision when they're going to buy a bond. Anyone have any more questions?
Any other questions? Students, anybody else have questions or comments we want to bring up? Are there any other economic data that's coming out today that could impact the sale?
Not, I don't think in the next little bit of time. We did have some economic data this morning, but it was just generic manufacturing data that wasn't really all that market moving. So nothing right now. I'm just looking at my Bloomberg real quick to see if I'm missing anything now. So nothing, unless there's something that's news-related that hasn't already been disseminated, that would affect overall pricing. I think that the market's already accounting for kind of the themes of the day with the Treasury market being up so much, and obviously that in turn Munis being up a couple. So I think that's already kind of played out in the market pricing.
Okay, if we had been pricing on the same day the Fed was meeting and everybody expected them to lower rates, what would that have done to the TAN sale?
So that's an interesting question. So the market is a forward-looking vehicle, right? It always is looking at what are the expectations going forward of rate cuts. So the day of which they're cutting the Fed funds rate, it's not really so much about, that they're cutting it on this date, so the rate should be lower. It's more about the market's already assumed that they're cutting this rate. It's already built into the prices of the Treasury market. What are they expecting to do going forward? And that's why we had so much volatility, especially on that day, because it was unclear if we were going to have another cut, and reiterated that, obviously Powell is going to be much more focused on whether economic information going forward is going to be, better or worse than the last 6 months, of which they've been discussing trying to cut more rates. So since it's such a forward-looking vehicle, I think we had all of that priced in. I don't think it would have affected any type of TAN sale in terms of pricing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I just wanted to run through it for the kids.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Any other questions from the students? If not, we're going to let Casey go because he's got to get busy and get on our bid because it sales at 11. I want to make sure he's ready. So any last questions for him? Okay, Casey, we're going to let you go. Thank you so much for calling in. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
So we're going to start to walk through the bid process, but first let Anna finish her introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name's Anna, going on my second year at Citigroup. I'm originally from Palm Beach County, and I went to the University of Florida, graduated in 2018 with a bachelor's in finance, so not too far away from where you guys are right now, and super excited to be here today. Yeah.
We've guessed who they are, but we haven't heard the backstory. Like, how did you learn to ride the bike at 2.5? What are the
Yeah, so
I mean, you gave us your bio.
Right, that's true. So my mom is Colombian and my dad's Armenian, and I grew up in a household where we spoke English, Turkish, and Spanish, and through that I learned my 3 languages. Yep.
If my dad named me, I don't think I had
do you want to do one more introduction? Okay, so one more introduction before we start. This person recently went skydiving for the first time. What do you guys think? It's going to be orange tie, Rick.
Thanks. I'm Rick Patterson with Raymond James. I've been working with school districts in Florida since 1991 and acted as lead banker or financial advisor probably for $10 billion plus in debt for schools, including Palm Beach schools, which was one of my first clients. My Groupon story is like everybody, you've got a bucket list. And skydiving had always been on my bucket list, but I wasn't sure I wouldn't be too chicken to do it. So, and I don't make your decision based on this, but we all get Groupons. I saw a Groupon, 2-for-1 skydiving. Probably not the best reason to go skydiving, but I was able to find a friend to do it. I will tell you the absolute hardest part is when you slide out of the plane. Everything else is great once you start falling. So I would absolutely do it again. And if you haven't done it and you think you would want to, make sure you pick a good firm and don't base it on price.
Okay, so Robert's gonna walk us through.
So we just spoke to Casey on the phone, and this is an older picture, but it's kind of similar to what the trading desk is like. People are on the phones talking to investors. They're getting information from their computer, and Casey referenced Bloomberg, which is basically financial software. It gives you all the market indicators, what's happening in the market. It tells you about trades. It's pretty much the lifeline of banks where you find out all the information you need to about what you're pricing, what you're doing at the moment. And this is pretty much the process that they do a bid. So basically the bank will put out a preliminary pricing wire where they'll put like the coupon and the yields, and this is kind of their preliminary indication of where they think this credit is. And then they'll go and talk to investors because they're the people that are eventually going to buy it. And then basically the underwriter will take all that information in, and then they will go ahead and adjust their bids. And then basically with the sale happening at 11, when we pull it up later, you'll basically see within the last minute, few seconds, that they basically hit submit on their bids, and that's how they pretty much get on the pulse of the market right now. And as you can see right now on the right, this is where the sale was last year, and you can see pretty much a lot of the underwriters were very close in the NIC, which is basically the net interest cost. So that is basically the price or the rate, the yield that they're putting on the yield with the coupon and the yield of the bond. And you can see that pretty much a lot of it was kind of jumbled together with a few banks on the higher end of it. And it's basically the one with the lowest bid, which is basically the best for the school district. They're the ones that win the bid.
We typically see sometimes there's one bank that will come in really low and everyone else is jumbled together. Last year, everyone was jumbled together, so that's kind of telling you where the market was, where they actually see investors buying it. We joke that one person, when they send in that really low bid, lost their job that day, because nobody else in the market's really seeing that. If you see, the cover bid is a bit away and all the bids to follow are clumped together. But what that's saying is it's a really aggressive. They really want this paper for either their relationship that they're supporting or there's somebody who really wants to buy this. So it's always interesting to see when the bids come in, if they're kind of close together or if there's somebody who jumps out.
So basically, we used a Broward County price to TAN, the same kind of financing product earlier this summer. And you can see basically the curve that day. And it was like an 11-month kind of term. And as you can see on basically the lowest bid, it's pretty much a few basis points ahead of it. So basically, there was a slight spread on the curve from where the 11th month maturity is and where the final rate came in, because the banks have to make some money on it. So there's quite a little bit of a spread built in so that they can sell it and make some money on it.
Something that's, before you flip to the next slide, that's interesting, that short-term yield curve. You don't normally see, this is months that's being showed up there. So the borrowing, what you would pay for the interest rate for 1 month to 14 months. And normally it starts off on the front end, it's lower, and on the back end, it's higher. You would think the longer that you're borrowing money for, the more interest you would have to pay on it because they're more at risk, as opposed to the shorter term, you would think that you would be paying less. Just like if you go to your bank and invest in just your savings account, it's not very much money, where if you put it out longer term, you would expect to get a higher return because they've got your money for longer. So what was going on in the market on this day is very abnormal, where the interest rates on the front end were higher than they were on the back end.
If you listen on the news, have you heard about the inverted yield curve? It's on the nightly news. It hits at CNBC. This is the inverted yield curve. So instead of being upwardly sloping the way it normally is, it's going down. It's backwards from what it normally is. It's very unusual. So it's still inverted in places, right? I haven't looked this week, but I think it's still inverted.
We're going to show where we are today. Okay. So we'll flip through the next slide and just leave it, do 2 more introductions before we get to the last slide and break out in our teams. So this person has a 10-week-old baby girl. Purple. Steve.
It's the sleep deprivation that you get to wear with a 10-week-old. Good morning. My name is Stephen Lenahan. I work with Wells Fargo. John and I get to partner, covering institutes like school districts, looking at both the bank side and the capital market side. I've had the pleasure of working with Leanne, being her primary bank for many, many years under 2 different firm flags, I can say. So when we talk about all the money that comes in and goes out of the district, essentially that comes through the district's or the school's Wells Fargo accounts that myself, my team manage. Some of my backstory, I got a accounting degree way back in the day, knowing I didn't want to be an accountant. I've been working with governments since 2008. I've been here in Florida since 2010. Happy to be here.
So this is, since you guys were guessing him for every single one.
Appreciate that.
This individual used to practice law.
That's me. So, hi, I'm Robbie Cox. I'm with Seabrook, Cisneros, and Schenck. I'm based in Washington, D.C. Any baby is a blessing. I'm glad my daughter's 3 and not 10 weeks old, but so those days were memorable days.
Does she know how to ride a bike?
Sort of, a little balance bike, but she does not know how to. So apparently your dad is a better teacher than I am. So yes, I used to practice law. I went to Florida State for undergrad and law school. I lived in Florida for many, many, many years before I moved to Washington, D.C. Practiced law for several years in Orlando. Decided I didn't like it. So made a career shift to public finance. I'm not sure that I'm a better banker than I was a lawyer, but it's stuck. And so I think that's That's my advice to all of you. Definitely work hard and apply what you learn in school, but don't be afraid to change if there's a good opportunity out there.
So before we break into teams, we're just going to kind of discuss what this slide is. So we had showed you what the Broward Schools pricing was and what the yield curve was that day. The short-term yield curve, again, the months 1 to 14, are down here at the bottom. The blue line is where we are today, which you can see is pretty flat. A year ago, when the district had done their TAN issuance, is that dotted gray line. And that's typically more of what you would see lower on the front end, higher on the longer end. So the district is going out today, or I'm sorry, last year they had gone out on the sale at the end of September to close out at the end of, to pay back the money on August of this past year. And so that was 11 months that the note was outstanding, and it priced at a 197. So you can kind of see where the 11-month was on the yield curve was right about spot on where you would expect it to be for borrowing for 11 months. So today we're going to break up into teams and kind of each of the bankers are going to take you around, develop a team. You have to create your team name. And what you need to do is you need to figure out what the $115 million is going to sell for today. You don't want to be too low because then you get fired. But you don't want to be that outlier that's so high up that you're going to charge them large interest and you show up on the last bid on the list that day. So we're going to, how many teams do we want to do? Six teams. So just start to count yourselves off 1 to 6. Go ahead. One, 2, 1. 4, 1. 1. Okay. So Anna's going to go ahead and take the ones. So if everyone will follow Anna. And you guys can just go over kind of somewhere over on that side. Pardon? Okay. What number are you? So all the 2s can go ahead and go over with Rick. Okay, so the 2s are going to go with Rick. The 3s are going to go with Jim. So Rick, do you want to take them over there? Jim, you want to take your group kind of like in the middle? The 4s are going to go with Steve, and you guys can kind of go hang out near the door over there. 5s can be with John. You guys want to kind of go over here. And then 6 will be with Robbie and just right where he is.
So these are months. So borrowing rates there.
Okay, yeah, that's not much of a difference.
So where are we now?
Official name. Well, I like the K idea, you know, that's unique. Now comes the fun part. It's coming up. They said they're ready.
Want to be close to that winning bid as possible. That's the way they go right now.
This is my computer, the line. Yeah, so that's close to the middle.
Solid blue line.
No anti-collusion here. Figure it out. Okay, so let's. All right. So just to recap.
Two minutes to submit your bids.
In the moment.
15 seconds. You have to bring your bids over here to Brenda.
I'm not your runner.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we'll let you guys know who the winning bidder is once we actually have the results in for the tan sale. But we want to kind of to walk you through, this is the Ipreo bidding platform, that this is what the bankers, nope, nope, you missed your deadline.
Make a point of that. I mean, like, us teachers, we give you a hard time about making it to class on time and deadlines. What is the implication for a company if they miss this bid deadline?
If they don't get their bid in by 11, they don't get to bid.
Right, and that could cost them how much?
Yeah.
A lot of money.
So.
A lot of money. So when we harp on you to be on time, there's a reason for it. Wait, says the Dwyer teacher who was last here.
I was going to just refresh it.
Who is Solidify Bank?
That was us.
That was you guys. All right. You don't know how to do a bid?
So what we're looking at right now is the banks that have signed up for this. So the bids are due in at 11 o'clock, and the banks can any point up before 11 o'clock sign themselves up to be able to submit a bid. Just because they're signed up doesn't actually mean that they'll submit, but if they don't sign up, they're not able to submit. So right now we have 9 banks that are signed up, which is pretty typical. Last year we had 11, so there might still be a few banks that come in. Some of them leave it to the last minute, which we joke they don't ever have technical issues, because if they did, they wouldn't be able to sign up or submit their bid. So we'll flip over to actually show the bids that have been in. So when we looked a few minutes ago, there was only 1 bid. And so now we have 5. And so this is actually with 8 minutes left before the bid to go in. This is actually a significant number of bids that we've seen. It is often that you see that they wait until kind of the last minute,
The
30
first time I
seconds
did
before.
one of these, I was waiting. We had no bids, and there was less than a minute to go, and I was afraid we weren't going to get any bids. And remember, I told you this is what we're going to use it to cover payroll, and I was really, really worried. And they all came in at the very last 30 seconds or so.
Yes. So every time we do a competitive sale, we remind clients, we like to see if there's not bidders signed up, then we get to be worrying. But the actual bids that come through, we tell them, you know, give it a minute, 30 seconds before, they'll come rushing in. And the bankers could probably speak better to this, but we think that's partly because they're still reading the market, getting the investors lined up so that they can put the most attractive bid in for the district to be able to win it. So they're waiting to make sure that their information is completely up to date before they submit the bid. So we just hit refresh as this goes through to see as they come in. We always like to see the person who puts their bid in first, where they fall kind of in the line of the winning bidder. If they were putting a bid in to show interest, or if their read on the market, if they were just really aggressive because they wanted to get the paper. So questions? Yes.
So who can guess, back in the day before internet, cell phones, fax machines, how did these bids get submitted?
What was it?
They sent a bird.
A bird.
They would send one of their most junior people to actually be here, and then they would have somebody, like, basically they would look for a phone, a pay phone, call their desk right before the bids were due, fill out the paperwork, and walk up and hand it to Leanne. I can't tell you how many times firms missed bids because they couldn't find a phone, they couldn't connect the desk, and then even when they started taking fax bids, it would jam up all the district's fax machines, and you couldn't get them in. So it's a lot easier for those guys these days, but people still, as we mentioned, do miss getting their bids in on time.
What do you guys think happens if 2 banks submit the same exact bid? How do we decide who wins?
Nope, it's not the first one.
Any other guesses? Yep. So if they're the same exact,
There's a
then you have a
tie.
tie between the winning bid.
You need a tiebreaker.
Yeah?
I've never had to do it.
Do the banks have like a credit score, so to speak, so you go with maybe a more solid, reputable, well-known? I mean, they're all solid and reputable,
Yeah.
but you know,
Nope, that's not it either. That's it.
Flip a coin.
You flip a coin.
So that's actually written in the bond documents of how you would decide. There was one instance where we had 3 bidders tied for the winning bid, which was unprecedented. We didn't know what to do, so we called counsel because obviously flipping the coin wouldn't fix. So they were like, that's your judgment call. You have to decide how you figure. So we were trying to figure out the fairest way to do this. So we had picked the one who submitted their bid first for the 3. Obviously, the 2 banks who didn't get it were upset. But we thought that that was the fairest way in that instance between the 2. But if it's only 2, you do flip a coin. So, any other questions?
Now, your bids came in, and we're going to select the winner based on who came closest to the winning bid from the bank. Without being under, if you came in under, then you lose your job. So it's the closest one. And we just have to wait. If y'all want to go ahead and have a seat, we've got 3 minutes. Not going under, right? Yeah.
Right.
Because if they go under, they bid too low.
It's like up to 19.
Yeah.
That's how much it usually is from 16 to 19, right?
Okay, this is the POS that I mentioned. You can pass that around, but that's the booklet we put together that goes to investors.
Bring up the team names.
And then after today, we'll be able to fill in the blanks. It'll be an actual offering statement, and that'll be posted probably tomorrow. And I'll send that to your teacher so they can share the link with you so you can access it.
Since we've got a couple minutes before the bid sale comes in, and we'll keep refreshing this for you guys, who all was on Team 1? How did you guys come up with your name TKFS?
What is it? Too cool for school with a K. Yeah.
Team 2. Who's on Team 2? How'd you guys come up with your name?
Our high school has like mighty lancers, so it makes the mighty with wires.
Team 3? Yep. How'd you guys come up with your name? What is, well, hold on, tell me what your name is first.
Flats. We're the flats because we're all wearing flat shoes, so.
Yeah. Team 4?
We just took the first one.
What's the team name?
Oh, hack. We just took the first letter in each of our names. H-A-A-C.
Team 5? Yeah, the late team.
I wasn't late. It's just I was all the way over here, and it took. I have heels. We're Panthers.
Okay.
Because we put the both mascots of Dwyer and John I. Yeah.
And Team 6? Yep.
Our bank was solidify, and that was pretty much the first word that came to my mind, and we all went with it.
Okay. So we've got 8 seconds left, and you'll see as the bids come in, we have 8 of the 9 bidders signed up that we had. And the bids have been submitted, so we will see the results in just a second.
close.
That's David, my boss on the phone. He couldn't be here
Hey,
today. So
David.
Bank of America sent in with the winning bid of 1.31. And you can see JP Morgan was just right behind them, down at 1.314 after the 1.311. So all of the bids, you can see the progression that go through. Some were really aggressive on the front end, but you also see on the back end, some of them kind of lumped together in that area of the curve as well. So we're going to tally up to see who the winning bidder is right now.
130. You bid a 130.
So those who bid 130 who were late were under. So you were too low. And TKFS was also too low. So you guys all lost your jobs. Team 2, the Mighty Panthers, would have been the next winning bidder at 1.37. So,
Okay, so congratulations.
So now kind of the next steps going through. If you click, go ahead and click on. We go through and this shows the details of what they bid, what they're agreeing to pay, the coupon that they bid at, which is 2.25%, and the yield, which is 1.3%. And down at the bottom, it gives us the contact of the banker who's up in New York on the short-term desk. Robert's going to go ahead and call him now, let him know that he won the bid. He'll send over the repricing sheet so that we tie out the numbers. Later in the day, they'll go ahead and wire over the good faith deposit to Leanne, which is a $1.15 million that they have to get to her today before 3 o'clock in order for the bid to officially be awarded.
And the reason they do that, they send 1% in. The thought is that if the transaction fails and it doesn't happen, we get to keep that 1% to cover our costs, because then we'd have to go do another sale. I've never had one fail, but that's the reason behind it. So we'll get that $1 million today, and we'll be watching our bank account. And the rest will come in when we close on October 3rd.
Yes. So we set up a closing memo and show them how the proceeds come in. So we deduct that out so that everyone, and we do a pre-closing beforehand, that all of the documents that were approved by the board are signed by the board in agreement with this deal.
Yeah, that offering statement that's flowing around the book, we'll update that and we'll fill in all the blanks. And you see there's red ink on the side of that. As a stockbroker, former stockbroker, that was always called a red herring. That's what they called the book when it was red. So it'll all be black. There won't be any red words on it anymore. And that'll be published online, and I'll share that with your teachers once that's available. Usually it takes a couple days for us to finalize everything and get it posted.
So, any other questions? Tidbits from you guys?
You're a quiet bunch. Yeah. Did you have fun? I mean, that was the TAN said we do this every year because this is the one transaction we do that we schedule in advance. I've already got the date set for next year. We reserved the room, and the TV station is here filming. The videotape from this will be available online as well. So you can watch it again if you wanted to, or somebody that missed it could see it. We make this available online. I'll send a note out to all the school board members today to let them know that we borrowed money at this interest rate, and they'll get the list of all the bidders, the banks. They also get the list of your bids. We send that out to the school board members as well, because they know that we have students here, and Mr. Shaw has joined us after Mrs. McQuinn left, so we've got a school board member still here. So we'll let them know we're going to be able to cover payroll, so they don't have to worry about that. So it's we're always really happy when the sale is completed and done, and we're so grateful that you all were able to come in today to watch. It's not something you get to see every day. You know, governments don't usually open the door and say, please come in and watch the process. So we like doing this with you all, and I look forward to seeing the next class come in next year so that they can share this experience as well. Do you have any other questions? You got a group of people here, the professionals in the industry. You can ask them anything you want. They may not answer, but we'll try.
What's the best rate that you ever gotten?
I think the lowest was like 0.98 once. We were below 1 year. She's got the sheet right in front of her.
.08.
0.08.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it was .08. Yeah.
I missed
In 2016.
That was a really good rate. That was like people begging us to take
Free
their
money.
People begging us to take their money. Run down the road.
Again, my name's Anna. I went to the University of Florida and I studied finance, and I also minored in entrepreneurship and history. So I got the healthy balance of, the more analytical financial classes, as well as doing something I was also passionate about, and studying history and learning about different cultures and in a historical context.
So I'm Robbie again. I talked a little bit about this before, but so my undergrad was in international affairs, but my concentration was in economics. And so I did study abroad and did some financial study while I was there, so that was interesting. And then obviously I went to law school after that.
I was a finance undergraduate, had a degree in finance. However, I was going into the military. I was on an ROTC scholarship. So I went off to the military for 6 years and then went to graduate school while I was away and got an MBA and with a concentration in international finance, and then joined the industry from there.
I got a degree in accounting, but had no intention of being an accountant. I wanted to try to get my just arms around business acumen, and I felt that was the degree that would give me the best insight. And I started out kind of in large corporate syndications and just migrated into a credit role with a healthcare, not-for-profit healthcare team, so still doing tax-exempt debt, and that was kind of one step away from government.
So I did my undergraduate at Florida Gulf Coast University in finance and economics, and then I did a Master's of Science and Finance program at University of Florida. And then after that, I actually came straight into the industry, into public finance. So I've been doing it for about 5 or 6 years now.
So I did something completely different. My undergraduate degree was in liberal arts. I was a zoology major, which is basically biology without the plant side. I got my MBA in finance, though, and while I was working, and that was at Memphis State University, I got to do an internship with the Bureau of Business and Economic Research. And one of the things that the Bureau did was work with firms like PFM in putting together the economic and demographic information relating to the issuer, which when you guys see the official statement, you'll see an appendix that has that in it. Through that work with PFM, I got an offer to interview with PFM in their Philadelphia office, and wasn't sure that's what I wanted to do, but started with them, and it was terrific. But I can tell you, as an undergrad and a graduate student, I had never heard of public finance. It's not something that you hear a lot about, but the takeaway from that is, keep your eyes open when you're in school. There might be a lot of opportunities that you don't think about, and you may be surprised.
So I have a degree in finance from the University of Central Florida, and I'm relatively new to the...
Tell them your fun fact.
Okay, fun fact. We didn't get to us, but my fun fact is my wife and I are big football fans. I'm very lucky that she likes college football as much as I do. So we've watched UCF play on 2 different continents and 5 different time zones since we've been together. Yeah, so from California to Dublin, Ireland. So that's my fun fact. But my degree is from UCF. I also minored in criminal justice. I was going to try to put those 2 together in some sort of FBI role, but the freshman 15 got to me, and I pushed myself out of the criminal justice role. But I'm new to public finance. I started with PFM a year and a half ago. Prior to that, I was on the private side of things. I worked for an investment manager, and we managed money for institutional pension plans and 401ks and different things like that. My role was also a little bit different from most of these guys. I started at a small firm. So these guys are all with big name banks. There's also plenty of small boutique firms out there that you could potentially join after you graduate. My firm had 75 employees. There were 35 of us in Orlando and 35 of us in Midtown Manhattan. So you don't all have to work at a big bank. There's other opportunities out there as well.
So I went to FSU. My undergraduate degree was in multinational business. I stayed in Tallahassee right after school and worked for the state Senate Majority Office. While that was fascinating, I realized quickly politics was not the avenue for myself. I moved back to Orlando, kind of hopped around in some jobs, and started with a government contractor in program management and was with them for 5 years. During that time, I went back and got my MBA from FSU through their online program. Realized that that wasn't what I wanted to do forever, and PFM kind of fell into my lap. So I've been with them now for 9 years and kind of have found a home there. So, and Robert?
Sure. No. So my fun fact is one time I had to hitchhike in Panama. I was in Costa Rica for a summer teaching English, and I wanted to see the canal, so I went to Panama for the weekend and went to the worst place ever to see the canal because it wasn't good, and no taxis were picking me up, so I had to go on a side street and hitchhiked. I don't ever suggest anyone to do that, but it was fun. I had a good time. And I got into public finance. I went to University of Florida. For my undergrad, I studied political science, and during that time I did a lot of research, and I liked the fact of research, so I went ahead and I got my master's in management at Florida. So basically, it was a master's program for people who didn't have a background in business but wanted to enter business. And I figured that with my background in the analytical side, even though I studied political science, that it would complement finance. So I studied that, and then I met PFM at a career fair, and it seemed like the perfect marriage of political science and the analysis that I wanted to do. So that's how I've been here, and I've been here for about 4.5 years now.
And politics do kind of play into what we do following the legislation. Every session, we're talking to Leanne and what the legislators are doing in the state of Florida that could potentially impact how they issue debt and what the requirements are on them as running a school district. So that background is very helpful in this industry. I don't know, David, are you still on the phone?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to go through your intro? David is managing director in the Orlando office and has been working with Leanne for
a very long time.
Very long time.
Are you still in Charleston?
Not now. Not now.
He was going to be here today. He got stuck in Charleston at a late board meeting. So I think, that was the last thing I heard. So.
Yep. The fun of being a consultant is when the client calls, you jump. And sometimes it means you don't make your flights back. Anyway. I started out as an electrical engineer, designing computers. Went back to get an MBA and thought I'd go run Microsoft or something small like that, and decided quickly I wanted to do something different, but I didn't have a clue. And when I graduated, it was a slow job market. There was a recession. So when I graduated with my MBA and had $0 in the bank, I was going to take the first job I could get, and got a job in this field. I had no clue what it was, but it's been great. It's a great mix of the need to be technical and good with numbers, but also be able to work with people and so forth. And it's been a great more than 20 years. I don't want to admit how many more.
Yep, and then I'll just mention, you all know, I was a graduate from John and Leonard. I grew up here. My parents were both teachers, and I got my degree from FAU and went into banking. So I actually worked for First Union Bank for about 7 years. They don't exist anymore. They became Wachovia and now Wells Fargo. But I worked there, and gosh, this phone's ringing. And then wanted to do something different. And the school district was actually one of my clients. And when I told them I was leaving the industry, they called and asked if I'd come work with them as a consultant. So I took a job as a consultant, never planning to stay. It was just an interim thing when I figured out what I wanted to do next. And ended up, I've been here now over 20 years and acted as treasurer. I'm at like $2.7 billion worth of debt that we've done. And it's been exciting. No 2 days are ever the same. So again, I'd echo, you need to keep your eyes open to see what's available. You never know what door is going to open when you're in school, once you're out of school, to decide what you want to do. And it's important to find what you like. and then do that. That way it doesn't feel like work. And I know that's very trite, it's an old saying, but it's true. I think everybody in the room really likes and loves what they do, otherwise they wouldn't. They get emails from me at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I get emails from them. We're all communicating on a really regular basis because we all really like what we do. So hopefully you find the same thing. Any questions?
Yeah.
Yep.
What is the hardest part about your job? All of you guys.
I mean, David, I think, can speak for this, being in two places at once. A lot of times with what we're doing, you're having conflicts and trying to manage your time. I know Leanne and I were talking yesterday. She's going up to Orlando to do a presentation tomorrow, and I'm presenting to the same group on Thursday, and pulling together that presentation while preparing for this and other transactions that you have going on, juggling your client responsibilities, just your time management. If the hours in the day could double, we would all be a lot better off. So that's one of the hardest things.
Yeah, I think that is the hardest, just juggling all the responsibilities. You have that work-life balance you hear talk about. It's really, really hard to do, even balancing just work, to keep track of all the things you have to do. So when your teacher tells you to be on time, they're training you for what you're going to have to do in college and the real world, because when a deadline comes, if I don't respond to a request, somebody else is going to take it on and get that opportunity. They're not going to wait for me to get something done. So that time management, if you can work on that now, that's going to help you so much. I was terrible in high school. I was last minute at everything. Try to get to where you're doing things early and manage that time. It's a great skill that will serve you well.
You guys?
I think I probably speak for a lot of the bankers when I say, and clearly time management is an important part of it. For all of us, excuse me, and you could go back to the graphic that Laura showed with the bankers on one side and the client on the other. So we all, I wouldn't say we serve two masters, but we very much want to make clients like Leanne happy and financial advisors like PFM happy, because they're involved in selecting us for the negotiated deals. Unlike competitive deals where it's just a jump ball, nobody's hired, a low bidder wins. On our side, you have to get hired based on quality of work, coverage, good ideas, that kind of thing. So we work all the way through the deal with Leanne and PFM, get everything structured, the offering documents, the credit ratings, everything is ready to go. But at that minute that it comes time for the sale, then we're basically handing our deal off to our desk. And we heard the desk earlier. Those are folks who don't know the client, who've never met the FA, and we're sort of stuck at that point. We want the district or the issuer to be very happy, but at the same time we don't want our desk to lose money. So we're sort of put in between the issuer and our desk at that point, and that's a tough place to be, because the last thing that we want to do after investing 5-10 years of coverage and goodwill in an issuer is have the issuer be disappointed, not in the job that any of us did as bankers, but on the fact that they just didn't feel, for whatever reason, that our desk did a good job actually selling the debt 8 weeks into the process.
I was just going to say on that point too, we've actually seen it where the bankers, when we're doing a pricing, have gone in and kind of yelled at their desk because they weren't paying enough attention to the client, they weren't putting enough effort in, and the client was get frustrated. So they are in a hard position when it comes to pricing. A lot of times things are going really smoothly, but if the lead underwriter on the desk isn't paying attention, it does put strain because the client's not in it. Unfortunately, it does reflect on the banker that they deal with on day-to-day, not the desk. So we have seen instances where the banker has gone and we've pulled a lead underwriter off and replaced it with somebody else because they weren't doing well enough. So,
I mean, I would just the time management thing is definitely the hardest thing for me. Like as a younger person coming into the workforce, you work with a lot of people that have been doing it for a long time, and you kind of have to manage their expectations. I'll be working with 3 or 4 different people at certain times, and you have to let them know, I just can't, what you're asking for, I can't get to you today. It's just not going to happen because I've got 3 other people that have already asked me for things. So just that time management and being able to clearly communicate what you're working on and what they can expect and that sort of thing. So.
And I think there's going to be a familiar theme going down. I mean, recently, the hardest thing in my job is leaving my family for the last 10 weeks because I wake up and I see my baby and, you know, I got to get to the office by 8, so that's tough. But really, you know, Rick kind of hit it, is being jammed between, you know, the firms that we work for, that we represent, and the clients that we work with every day, and trying to find the appropriate balance of, you know, how to best serve them with the expectation of our companies. I mean, that's kind of our roles generally, is having that real, you know, that frontline relationship. I think Rick kind of hit it best.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. Are there other questions? I mean, maybe one, you two have another question. It was a really great question you asked, though. I mean, there are many competing demands in the workplace. There are also in high school, and you're going to find it in college as well. Your time is going to become really precious the further you advance, and trying to figure out how to manage it. I think that's what everyone is saying up here, is there's a lot of things that will compete for your time. Trying to figure it out is a challenge.
Other questions for them? I'd ask, do you have a piece of advice of something they should focus on or make sure they know while they're in college to prepare them for their first job when they step out? So I would throw in public speaking. Make sure you know how to talk to people. You know, you spend so much time on Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and everything. You're typing, and you got to be able to talk to people. When you go to get a job, it's going to be how well you can talk to somebody. So make sure you don't ignore that. You want to make sure that you can talk to people, speak well, and write well, because that's not really going to go away. You're always going to have to be able to do that.
Can I add something?
Go ahead.
It follows closely to speaking. It's learn how to write. For a lot of the clients that we work with are older than, they're not 25. We're typically dealing with the higher level experienced staff at a place, and they don't function in the world of partial sentences and one letter words that we all do in texts, and so a lot of what we see with some of the newer people we hire is they don't have the best writing skills. And so both speaking, writing, the bottom line is you make an impression every time you open your mouth or send an email. And I'm notorious for sending goofy words in emails, accidents and things.
I have a great story, not appropriate for this, of how great David is at proofing his emails when he sends them out. So he's the last one to, talk about writing.
Well, let's just say I've learned from my mistakes the painful way, but anyway.
I think it's important to remember when you're starting out, too, that no task is too small. You're going to be asked to do a lot of different things in whatever job you end up in, and the worst is when you have someone, no matter how intelligent you are and hardworking you are, you need to show that you're dedicated and that you're willing to be a team player. And so tasks that are asked of you, we tell our analysts that all the time. There's going to be things I still hop in and make books for presentations. That's part of your job when you're an analyst, and it still is. David would be out there binding machines if it needs to. So it's just no matter what level you get at your career, you always need to be willing to make sure that the team works and the jobs are done.
Yeah, we call it other duties as assigned here. So you have your job description. This is what you're supposed to do, but on any given day, you're doing something that you had no plans to do, that's not on your to-do list, but it's the right thing to do for the team. And I want to make sure before we go, I've got 2 team members here too that you haven't had a chance to talk to. Brenda Giampetti is up there. She's the one that was working on your bids, and Ron Haran was helping with that. He's the one that actually wrote that book. He put together all the data that's in that book we passed around. So it's definitely a team. When I think of issuing a debt, and we're doing this, it's a team between the team here at the district, and that will also include Mike Burke, CFO. He'll be involved. Our accounting director, our budget director, risk management, facilities will be involved if we're building, because I need to know what they need money for, and then the financial advisor, investment advisor, bond counsel, disclosure counsel, the bankers and the underwriters. I mean, all those people come together to make a team, and we win or lose all together. So that teamwork is so important, and you have to be willing to just jump in and do whatever it takes to get the work done. You can't have the ownership, I'm just going to do my piece. If you do that, you all fail. You've probably seen that with some of your projects that you work on. It's really important. Other comments, questions? Yeah. Nobody's using their phones. They all have their phone with them, and mine rang earlier, sorry about that, but when you're focusing on something, you set the phone aside. If I'm in a meeting with somebody and they pick up their phone and they're reading their text, they're not paying attention to what I want them to pay attention to. So that's what everybody's doing. They're all paying attention to you. You have undivided attention right now from a whole bunch of professionals. So hopefully you've enjoyed that and you've been able to learn something from everybody we brought together for you today. Any other questions? Yep.
What causes an inverted yield curve?
What causes it?
Yeah.
Who wants to answer the reason for an inverted yield curve?
So, in the most simplest of form, it's the U.S. Treasury curve that's inverted, right? So what is occurring right now is investors are de-risking. So they're taking money out of the equity markets and buying U.S. Treasuries. What they're saying is, we don't think the equity markets are going to be strong long term, so next few years. So we're de-risking. So we're buying treasuries out further on the yield curve than short. So 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, because we know we're going to get that money back. When they buy treasuries, it's a supply and demand thing. So when more people are buying treasuries, market values go up. So in bonds, yields are inversely related to market value. So when more people buy the bonds, the yield that you're receiving on that bond becomes less and less. The opposite's also true. In a risk-on environment, when investors are moving out to equities and riskier assets, the market value goes down for treasuries, so the yield you're going to get on that bond goes up. Part of the reason is, I mentioned earlier in the first part of my speech, that the trade tensions with China is a really big deal right now. You all may have also heard about Brexit, which is the UK leaving the European Union. That's a big uncertainty as far as trade agreements and with the rest of the world. And then we also have countries like North Korea who kind of pop their head up every once in a while and stir up the market a little bit, whether they want to shoot off a rocket here or there. That's also causes uncertainty in the markets. When folks are uncertain about the future of the market, they prefer to be safe versus having too much money tied up in equities and potentially have more of a loss.
Yeah, I'd even add to that, in Europe, there are countries right now where their interest rates are all negative. So in Germany, I haven't looked recently, but in Germany, the interest rates were negative. So if you put money in the bank today, instead of earning 1 or 2%, you're paying them 1 or 2% to hold your money. So people in Germany are sending money to the U.S. and they're investing in treasuries here because they can get a return on their money. There's a lot of factors that go into that.
Yeah, and then so another thing about the inverted curve is the Fed kind of controls the 2-year and in on the curve. So the Fed sets that overnight rate that we saw that was 1.75 to 2%. They control that to help control a couple things. The Federal Reserve is in charge with ensuring full employment and also keeping inflation in check. So right now, employment, we are at full employment. We're at 3.7% of unemployment. That's historical lows going back 50 years. What we don't have is we don't have inflation where the Fed would like to see it. The Fed thinks that a 2% growth target, kind of year over year, is a healthy growth of the economy. Goods and services getting more expensive by 2% every year. We're only at about 1.6%. So the growth is not where they want it to be. So what are they doing? The Fed's been lowering that short-term interest rate, which makes borrowing cheaper for all of us, in the hopes that that will spur more growth in the economy and help boost inflation, get it up to that 2% target. So as the Fed is bringing down the short-term rates, the inside 2 years, the hope is that that curve will become upward sloping again or no longer inverted. The problem is the Fed's bringing the front end down, there's also skepticism about future growth in the global economy bringing the back end down. So the Feds can't bring the front end down fast enough to keep the back end from coming down, which is why we're still in an inverted state.
I was just going to say, there's a lot of people, economists, that will point to an inverted yield curve and say that's a sign of a future recession. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of attention being paid to inverted yield curves right now. It's just what people think the economy is going to be like in 4 or 5 years. Okay. Heavy economic issue. Any other questions that we can answer?
I was actually reading in the book, and I noticed that the last 5 years, going back to 2014, it's always been 115 million. Do you expect that to change at all, or reasons why it hasn't changed, maybe?
It hasn't changed. One of the reasons is because the market likes stability. The minute I raise the amount we're borrowing, we'll have the credit rating agencies, Moody's, will call and say, why are you raising it? Why do you need more money? Are you not in as good financial condition as you used to be? Now, we're looking at it. I may raise it next year. That referendum that the public approved, going from $250,000 to a full $1 to pay for teacher salaries and security and mental health, all that extra money's coming in. And starting next year, all those police officers are going to be hired. We're hiring them right now. So as the salary costs grow and continue to increase, I may need to borrow money next year. I didn't need to this year, but it's something we're looking at. We may need to increase it next year. I try to keep it constant because, again, it just shows stability that we don't need to borrow more, but it's something we'll be looking at. If you go back probably about 10 years, it used to be 85 million. And we increased it because the state changed the way they funded us.
It's on the PowerPoint. I pulled up your TAN history and interest.
That document, yep.
Yeah. Can we switch back to the... Yep.
Yeah, you can see back in 2009, it used to be 85 million. And that's when the state changed. They used to give us, the state funds a portion of the district and property taxes fund the rest. So the state understood that school districts didn't get property taxes until November and December. So they used to give us basically half our money in the first quarter to help school districts with funding. And the state realized that they had their own funding issues and couldn't afford to help school districts anymore. So they leveled out the way we got money. So we didn't get that extra money at the first quarter of the year, which meant we needed to borrow more. So we increased it from 85 to 115 at that point, and we've kept it constant ever since. We've changed the maturity. If you can see, this first year it went out to September, and then starting in 2009 we had it mature in February until 2016, then we pushed it back out. That was because the interest rates were so low. You look at these rates, they were incredibly low. And so we'd be paying that interest, and I couldn't earn enough interest on the money. So when this money comes in, this $115 million, we're going to use it to cover payroll for a couple months. And in November, when that tax revenue comes in, I'm going to take that money and set it aside and invest it and earn as much money as I can on that. So then you'll have the interest cost and the cost to issue the debt, and then I'll earn interest on the proceeds once we don't need it anymore. And the idea is we make a little bit of money. That's called positive arbitrage. So way back here before the recession, we used to earn in the $1 million window when interest rates were higher. And when the rates dropped, I couldn't invest the money to earn enough to cover our costs. So we shrunk the time frame of the TAN. And then now that the interest rates starting to rise, and of course they fell last week, but the idea is the rates were starting to go up, and we'd be able to invest that. So for last year, we borrowed, the net interest cost was 2%, and I was able to invest at a higher rate, and we actually made $300,000 on it. So it's kind of nice. You can't do that privately. I can't do it for myself, but we can do it for government because we're borrowing at a tax-exempt rate, and then we're investing at a taxable rate. So we can actually make money on this transaction. Nice when we can cover our cost. That was a good question. You need to pick up chocolate on your way out. Any other questions? I know you all need to get back so you can make lunch, right? Okay, so I'm going to let y'all go. I thank you very much for coming, and I'd like you to take a moment to thank all of our guests that came in today. And I really, truly thank you all for coming. You make our day to be able to share this with you. So thank you very much. Have a safe trip back. Oh, the winning team, we do have certificates. You can pick those up on your way out. You can take that back as being part of the winning team. No? Yes? Yep. Brenda's got them right over there. Thank you all very much.